Hi, and welcome to Journey Forward with Jory Rose, where you will gain insights, tools, and inspiration to get unstuck and live your best life. Jory is a licensed marriage and family therapist with a passion for helping people cultivate awareness and authenticity so they can show up fully in all aspects of their life. And now, here's Jory.
Hey everyone, it's Jory. Before we jump into today's episode, I want to share with you some exciting news. One of my most favorite things to do is lead retreats, and I am so excited that I just booked the dates for a women's retreat at Marival Resort in Tucson, Arizona, September 26th through 29th. These 4 days and 3 nights of mindful relaxation in the most luxurious grounds you can imagine is going to be just the thing for you to renew and recharge your spirit. So save the dates if you're interested. Spots are going to be limited, and I will keep you posted of when you can check out the information to secure your spot for this upcoming fall. I hope you enjoyed today's episode and stay tuned for more information on the retreat. Hey everyone, welcome back to Journey Forward with Jory Rose. I am so looking forward to my conversation today with Eli Weinstein, coming to us from the East Coast this morning. Happy New Year to you and welcome to the show. I'm so happy to have you on. Please share with the audience a little bit about yourself, what you do. You've got an awesome podcast, The Dude Therapist, and give us a little bit of who you are and how you show up in the world.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. I know I had you on my podcast, and I was so excited to do a podcast swap because I love the content that you create, which is one of the reasons why I wanted you on my podcast. So thank you so much, first of all, for having me. My name's Eli. I'm a therapist out in New York, and I'm married for over 5.5 years. Have a beautiful almost 19-month-old baby.
Aww.
Who
she's so
God
darling.
Sleeping.
You
I
post
know
beautiful photos of her on Instagram, and
she said porcupine yesterday. I don't know how. I don't know why. I said something about like, oh look, a porcupine, and I didn't expect her to repeat it, and she went porcupine. So always keeping me on my toes, which makes me a better person. And
having a baby is the ultimate practice in a beginner's mind, isn't it?
Oh my goodness, and it's amazing to watch.
Yes.
From a mindfulness perspective, even from a therapist perspective, developmentally, like everything I learned in grad school that I thought I would never have to deal with is literally just like at my fingertips. I'm like, oh, that's that theory. Oh, there's that. Oh, cool. That's what that talked about. So it's very fun to watch and to experience as a dad, as a therapist. It's a really fun time for my wife and I, and for, hopefully our child. I hope she's having a good time.
Yeah, it is. I was a sociology major in my undergrad, and obviously my master's in psych. And I went into parenting with that kind of same perspective, maybe not exactly what you just said, but with this like, wow, I get to actually see this unfold as I've been taught things.
Yeah.
And one of the things I was really curious about, and this will be fun for you to kind of watch your daughter as she grows, and my girls are almost 15, and then my older one is 17 and a half. And I took really, really detailed journaling of my daughters when they were babies, because I was really curious about their personalities. And I was so fascinated with who they were as babies and how that would unfold as they got older. Perfect. Yeah, you just held it up and showed it to me. And I recently, probably within the past year, pulled out those baby journals, and my girls and I read it together. And I tell you, they are them. Like who they were. I can even tell you things that they were like in utero, that they're still the same. But it's so fascinating to just observe the developmental process and the personality unfolding and the bits of parts that you contribute into your nurturing, and the part that is just purely nature.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing to watch. And the funny thing for my wife and I is that when she was first born, she was a spinning image of my wife. The way she looked, her behaviors, her facial expressions, all the little nooks and crannies that make her who she is. And little by little, my wife recently said to me, begrudgingly, she said, I think she's turning into you. And I'm very happy about that. My wife's family isn't as thrilled, but it's just a funny thing to see both of us coming together and seeing that personality type, whether it's who she's around that day, what she's doing with us, my wife and I, we have different little things we do with her, whether it's bath time, I do bedtime, the little things and the stuff that we do during that time, she picks up on, and it's very, very adorable to watch it and fun times for all of us to experience.
Ah, it's so sweet. Isn't that so funny how we feel attached to how they look? Like when my first
I could
daughter was
care less, by
born.
the way.
Yeah, maybe it's a mom thing because when my first daughter was born, she looked nothing like me or my side of the family. But when my second daughter was born, the very first thing the nurse said about her was the very first thing the nurse said about me when I was born. And I immediately was like, okay, this one's mine. And it's funny. I don't know why that
Well, I,
matters,
I
but
think
yeah,
I think it's um uh, a psychological thing that if you look at back at when babies were born, that was the deep connection of knowing that they're
yeah,
knowing that they're yours.
yeah.
I don't mean like affairs. I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking
Right,
about
right, right.
psychological connection of mother
Yeah,
to child, of you see yourself in them or they look like family.
yeah.
It creates a stronger bond.
I think it creates a stronger bond too. It's
Not that
fascinating.
not if when she was born looked like me, she wouldn't love her, but it just
Right, right,
makes
right,
a deeper connection. Like I carry this child, she's mine,
right.
and
Yeah.
she looks like me, she's even more mine.
So I have so many questions I want to ask you because I don't often have male guests on, and no reason for that. I tend to have not had many men who are in the same field. I mean, I've obviously interviewed John a bunch of times, and he and I do a lot of joint work, but I'm really fascinated with some of your male perspective of the topics that I talk a lot about.
Hmm.
And so I first am curious, how did you decide to become a therapist? Did you always know that that was the journey that was going to be what you were on?
I get that question a lot. I love people, whether that's a sickness, whether it's just who I am. I love it. It makes me who I am. I love talking
Yeah.
to people. I love being with people. I love hearing stories. I love connecting with people. And so I thought when I was a kid, not fireman or policeman or classic or construction worker, like a classic
Right, right, right.
boy growing up, I wanted to be something with human beings. So I thought, of
Mm,
course, doctor. And I don't have the brain for that. I don't have the memory for that. I don't have the commitment for 10 plus years to be in school.
yeah.
Not my thing. I have ADHD. School was a big struggle for me as a kid.
Mm,
And I thought to myself, what else can I do that helps people on a journey to really be with someone at a low and high point, to be there when they
yeah.
need you? And it kind of smacked me in the face to be a therapist.
Hmm.
And it doesn't mean that it's easy or great, but I love what I do because I get to be with people on whatever they are on the spectrum of their life. And
Yeah.
it's a really
Isn't
fun thing to be.
isn't it a privilege?
100%. It's a huge privilege that someone tells me things or is there
Yeah.
with me and experiences things with me that they do not with anyone else, maybe in their life.
Yeah.
That a woman can tell me intimate things about her life that she might not even tell her partner or spouse
Yeah.
or mother or father. And then a
Yeah.
man can open up in a way that he might never do with his partner or spouse or children or loved ones. But with me, it's a different story because I'm on a different level, not in greatness, just the trust
No.
is different because of the title that I have. Um,
Yeah.
and I think it's a huge honor, and I never take that for granted in the work that I do.
I don't either. I it was interesting. I went to the same therapist for 5 years when I was kind of in my 1/3 life crisis, as I call it, and kind of beginning, middle, post divorce for me. And I remember he used to often say to me how deeply touched he was in our working relationship with each other, which,
Hmm.
and also, and this is something interesting too, that, as a female client that I was of his, I had never had the experience to have a really healthy boundaried relationship with a man.
I get that so often.
And
That
it's a
statement, I get
very,
that.
yes, it's a very intimate relationship, and so beautiful to know how boundaried it can be, even when the most intimate of details arise, because it's not typical of a male female relationship, right?
Very true.
And yet we can role model these incredible boundaries and connection and depth and great love. I have such great love for my clients. Like, I deeply care about my clients. And when my therapist used to say to me, you know, what a privilege it was to be on my journey with me, I didn't quite get it. I'm like, okay, this is your job. Like, I know that, you know, I feel this closeness with him, but I didn't know that he could feel it in return.
Yeah. And it's a weird place to be because we're taught in school and in grad school, boundaries, 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 protect yourself, protect your clients, boundaries. But at the same point, it's supposed to be human. And to share with a client, I shared plenty with my client to say, thank you so much for letting me in. Like, I'm a random stranger, whether we've been working for 6 months, my clients now that I've been working with is the longest is 2.5 years. That's a relationship, a professional
Absolutely.
relationship, but it's a relationship. And there are boundaries. They cannot text me all day, every day.
Hmm.
At certain points of night, I will not answer, but I've
Yep.
created those boundaries for me, and that works for me and for them. But they
Yep.
also know that if they need me, I'm there for them.
Yep.
And it's like this weird dance to make sure that you're not crossing a boundary, but knowing that you're also being human and not cold, which I think is the old
Yes.
school model of therapy, which I am very against. I
Me
am not a
too.
big fan, and some people might not like that. And that's not for them. That's good. Go for someone who might be cold and removed. If you need that blank slate who's not going to do anything with you, go for it. How are you doing? Good.
Ugh.
That if that's what you want to lay on that couch and do that kind of therapy, that I embrace that if that's what helps you. But for me as a
Yeah.
therapist, that's not my style. And
And this is
then
why something I
weird.
think you and I aligned a lot when I was on your
Yes.
podcast. We talk a lot about this. And I think it's a really valuable conversation to be having for our audiences here on the podcast, because I'm not sure everybody knows that it's possible to have that kind of therapy relationship. And now more than ever, pandemic, politics, social injustice,
Hmm.
mental health has risen to the top of its game in terms of, I don't think anyone has any shame anymore in saying I go to therapy. I think people have pride in, I have an amazing therapist. What do you have? Right?
Yeah.
Like, it is something I think people are proud to acknowledge, because we can't go through this world alone these days, not these days. And, you know, I know I shared with you, I show up in my therapy as who I am. I, you know, my clients know a lot about my life because it feels inauthentic to cultivate this deep relationship without mutual vulnerability or mutual showing up. And I'm not saying they show up and I talk about myself, right? I'm not
Which,
taking
by
up
the way,
their time.
that's an amazing point to make, because that is an unhealthy boundary for a relationship when
Yes,
when the therapist is telling you more than you are participating in therapy. That's a red flag for it not being a healthy therapeutic relationship.
absolutely.
But it doesn't mean that you can't share as a therapist. It just should be therapeutic,
Exactly.
like
And
with a
it, to me,
purpose.
whatever I share is in service of the work. And
100%.
so usually it's, wow, you know, I know how that feels. I've been there. As I'm teaching you these tools, let me share with you how I've put those tools into practice myself. So they can see it as a living example
Hmm.
of, I'm not just telling you, but I know from a place of inner knowing that I see you and I get you and
I
I've
love
been
that.
there.
I'm very open that I struggle and have struggled with ADHD in the past, and it comes up. It's not a stumbling block or in my way as much as it used to be as a kid or as a teenager. But when I have clients who have ADHD, I connect with them on that by letting them know that I have ADHD too, especially when I meet with them in the first off, especially when in an office setting.
Sure.
Well, I don't even know what that means anymore. I haven't been in my office
I
in a
know, right?
year, just crazy. But I let them know that by me moving around in my office, I twiddle with a pen or I tap my feet or I move a lot in my chair. I always let someone know that it's not because I'm not interested or not focused. It's my ADHD. And this is how I am
Yeah.
focusing by doing all these little things. And if that's a problem, I let them know. But I, off the bat, that is one of the first conversations I have,
Yeah.
because they need to know that I'm a human. When my
Yes.
wife was pregnant and I had to go to doctor's appointments and miss things, or when she gave birth and I was out or paid time off for that and paternity leave, or I have a chronic illness and I miss because I get sick sometimes.
Yeah.
I am not an ironclad robot
No.
God that knows everything and can be everything. I am human. And when clients start to learn that, I think that creates a deeper relationship with their therapist.
Well, and in addition to that, I think it gives our clients permission for them to say, oh, I'm human too.
Mm-hmm.
I can place less expectation on myself and my own journey
Yeah.
because these are real things. I did the same thing. I remember a couple of years ago, my youngest daughter was flying from California to Arizona by herself to go to a summer camp, and a camp she'd never been to. And she
Mm-hmm.
was showing up a day late because of her dance recital and was being picked up by the camp director, who I never met, and then
Mm-hmm.
driving an hour and 45 minutes to the campsite. And she
Wow.
was, I think, 12 or 13 at the time. And I remember that day, I had my phone out, face up, my entire day of clients. And like everyone who walked in, like, hey guys, I'm a mom first right now.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as my phone gets a text or calls, I apologize in advance. I'm picking it up because I'm showing up as a mom first.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have a problem with that, then you're not my client, right? Like, not that you're
Yeah.
not my client, but it's that idea that this style, like you said, may not work for everybody.
Nope.
But the people it does work for, oh, it's going to be
Very,
valuable
very strong.
connection.
You know, there's a scene there's a show that came out on HBO Max, I believe, The Undoing.
Yes.
And there's a scene where an emergency happens. I don't want to ruin the show. And the therapist has her phone and answers a phone call because it's the emergency hotline from the school.
Yep.
And it's a couple session, and the couple gets very frustrated and sassy with her.
Yep.
And she says, I don't pick my phone up unless it's an emergency, and this is an emergency phone call. I need to take this.
Yeah.
And they like roll their eyes and get upset. But I love the fact that they showed that even though she's like a high end, gets paid thousands of dollars a session, whatever it is, she has to create a boundary that she's a mom and there's an emergency at my kid's school. And I picked up on that. I was like, oh, that's great.
You know what I used to do after my divorce, when I was dating and I'd go out on first dates? I'm very close with my daughters, and I say goodnight to my kids every night when they're at their dad's. You know, we talk throughout the day, we say goodnight at night. And I would use it as a litmus test on a date, on a first date. I would keep my phone out and I would say, I apologize, but my girls are at their dad's, and I always say goodnight. And whether it was a text or just a quick, hey, goodnight, goodnight, love, I love you. I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
I was not interrupting the date. I was being a mom first, and that was my value. And I used it on purpose as a litmus test to be able to see if any man would be offended or irritated or annoyed by that. Guess what? You're not my person. And I'm okay with that.
I love that.
So these boundaries can show up in the same way in our personal relationships,
100%.
right? How we have boundaries. So what do you think are the qualities perhaps from your family growing up that allowed you to have this compassionate, open-hearted, because and I hate to sound, as you've talked with my fiance, John, and then all the work that John does in masculinity, a lot of the qualities of therapists tend to not be considered the masculine. And I'm not trying to man box anybody.
But a majority of therapists are females.
Yes. And so what was it in how you were raised or growing up that allowed you to tap into this deep emotional aspect? Because again, not typical of a man. And yet I think it's what every woman out there wants in a partner, in a husband, in a father. And so how did you learn that?
I love this question because it gets me to promote my family and my background a little bit. So I grew up a religious Orthodox Jew. Still am, still practicing. And one of the biggest things is charity, is giving, is compassion for the other, for the stranger, for thy neighbor, whatever the Bible verse you want to use.
Yes.
whatever New Testament, Old Testament you're reading. But also I grew up, I have one brother. He's 6.5 years older than me. So I'm basically my only child.
Yeah.
It was very separate. Not that we don't have a good relationship, but I was very much raised solely by my parents because he was so removed from, he was with his friends, he was in high school, whatever he was doing. And I was just taught to be in touch and in tune with my emotions. Also, I think because of my ADHD, my emotional awareness wasn't so great. Mm-hmm. And then I had to truly learn how to be emotionally aware, self-aware about my actions. And my compassion has been something that I think I was born with and then taught by watching my parents be involved in the Jewish community, in their synagogue, with the charities they were involved with, giving and helping others was something that I just picked up on. And I think also it's probably part of my nature. It's something who I am. It's always been that way. My mom used to tell me stories that when I would walk on the street and I would see a homeless person or someone who might have been deaf or disabled, I would cry when I was a kid
Mm.
because
You felt that
upset
so
me so
deeply.
deeply. It would really, really mess with me. Not that I felt bad for them. I did feel bad for them. It was that I just felt
It
their
wasn't
pain.
pity.
It
Yeah.
wasn't pity. That's the word. Thank you. It wasn't that I pitied them. I felt their pain. And I
Yeah.
think that kind of started my journey of being very emotionally aware. And you're right. It is not a very manly thing to be, which I definitely have discussed with John. The
Yes.
flack I got as a kid growing up and the bullying I got as a kid, being that emotionally in touch man or boy.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
had more girlfriends than I had guy friends because I was that guy who they can talk to, and I would be listening, and I wouldn't have any other agendas other than just
Which
being friendly.
every girl and woman wants in a
I
man. Like
know.
this is the part that men don't seem to
It's
get.
like a unicorn. It's like a unicorn. It's like, but in the
Seriously.
end, I found it a huge superpower of mine that I can
Mm.
be compassionate for the other. It doesn't mean I'm perfect. Of course, things get in my way. My ego gets in the way. My manlyhood or masculinity sometimes does get in the way of that, of course, like any other person.
Sure.
But I
You're
remember
still
being in
human
grad
after
school. I'm
all.
still human. I remember in grad school, I felt so much pressure in a weird way to represent the man because my class was like out of 35 people in one class, I was the only guy or one or two men, and he was
Wow.
quiet and sat in the back, and I was like the active one. And even at graduation, the statistics of male therapists, even the practice that I work at in Queens, at the highest we had 60 therapists, and I think maybe 5 or 6 were men,
Wow.
and it's not a very common thing, which I
And
hope
yet
is a
you
good
see
thing.
more like men in research and psychology,
Yes, so they're
right?
in more of the
So
educational research,
right.
psychiatry, the
But not
doctors.
the interpersonal practices.
No, no, it's a weird thing, and I'm okay. I'm okay with that. I love that. If someone needs a male therapist, that's me.
Yeah.
If someone can't deal with a male therapist because of whatever maybe trauma or issues that they may be struggling with, that's okay as well.
Yeah.
And it just helps me maybe have a different perspective on things, which is why I started Elevation and why I
Yeah.
started the Dude Therapist podcast, just to give a different perspective and a different viewpoint that might not be as common in the world of social media and therapy that we see.
So talk a little bit about Elevation and what your podcast is and what it is that you're hoping through that messaging, or how it is that you show up, what it is you're wanting people to receive.
So it really, for me, what started was bringing normalcy and a human aspect to therapy.
Yeah.
Um, and I do post a lot of pictures of my family, of me, versus other therapists that I've seen that mix and match or maybe do only quotes or these like taglines.
Yeah.
And I find that valuable, and they get so many likes and follows. And if that's what happens to me, great. If not, that's also great. It's really about helping people kind of gain perspective of a digestible, relatable mental health without
Yeah.
all the big words and the terminologies. It doesn't mean I don't use them, but I explain them in a human way. So as a father, it's okay to struggle. As a husband, you can struggle. As a therapist, you can struggle. As a person in this world dealing with politics, religion, socioeconomic issues, all the things that come at us at all different directions. Well,
Yeah.
here's how we deal with it as humans. And it was also an outlet for me to bring things to light, whether it was my struggles as a father, as a husband, and to see and help maybe other people who might be going through that, who don't want to bring it to light, who don't want to talk about it, or don't have a platform to have a
Yeah.
perspective on it. And the Dude Therapist is just another way, because I'm not a great writer. I'm a better speaker. So that was another way of getting my point across or my message across in a different avenue. Similar things, nothing really that different. Just a
Yeah.
different avenue to get information across and put it out there.
I love that. So what would you say let's go into the parenting piece, because parenting is something excuse me, I love talking about, because I think parents have often really, really, really good intentions and
Yeah.
often poor execution.
Yes.
And some of it's conscious, some of it's unconscious, right? I'm
Yeah.
not saying any parent is consciously wanting to, quote, screw up their kids. That's not at all what I'm saying. But when I say it's conscious, it's like they know that it's not going how they would like, but they're not really sure how to change, right? Because in my view, people either emulate what they were raised in, Or they kind of go the opposite. And not a lot of couples actually take the time to sit down to say, what are the values important to you in parenting? What are the values that are important to you? What do you want to bring in for tradition and for ritual and for discipline and for communication and the home environment? Like, couples just don't sit down and have that conversation. And so it becomes, trial and error, or it becomes, switching whatever's happening in the moment to like make a quick fix with something. So what are some of the tenets as a father that you really intentionally try to bring into your parenting? What does that look like? And how does that create conversation with you and your wife?
I love this. I was like waiting. I'm like so excited for this question, because so in the Jewish tradition, something that a lot of people do, not everyone, is that they meet with a rabbi for like groom and bride conversations when it comes to the laws of the Jewish tradition and marriage and sex and intimacy and the wedding day, what that entails, all those things. And it's a couple of classes, and you meet with a rabbi or rabbi's wife or anyone in the community. And it's a very great relationship that I have with this person, a young, vibrant rabbi. And he asked me this question. And he sat with my wife and I. We were fiance, whatever it's called, that we were engaged. And he said, I want you to create something called an import and export list. And we're like, what's that? And he made us sit there for as long as we needed. I think it took us maybe between 30 minutes to an hour in his house, where we sat there with the two of us discussing, okay, your family does X, Y, and Z, and your family does X, Y, and Z. What do we want to import into our life? And what do we want to export? And
I love that.
it doesn't mean that we hate those things. It doesn't mean that, but that's just not for us. And it doesn't mean that the things that we grew up on are negative or bad, or we're bashing on it. This is not a bashing session that your parents do this and your parents do that. No, it was a judgment-free, what do we want our household to look like?
Yes.
And that was a very solidifying moment for us as a couple. My wife actually keeps it in her wallet, and we go through it every anniversary. We missed this year because of Corona, and like we didn't have time to sit and have a date night or that for our anniversary, but it's something we review. Are we holding to what we value as a couple for our households? That's the first thing I would say.
I love that.
Really fun thing. It's such a cute idea as a date.
Yes.
And it doesn't have to be judgmental. It's fun. Import, export. I don't know where he got it from, but that's what he started it. I'll give him the credit. And the other thing I would say as a father, the thing that I bring is I'm a very big believer in being there with love and care and affection, being there. So I'm a very busy person, and I try that when I'm with my daughter, whether it's bedtime or we're playing, I put my phone away.
Yeah.
That I don't get distracted, because her and mine relationships, that matters more than anything else. Because when we get older, it's not going to be the things that I gave her or the things that I bought her, but the memories that we have and the vibe and relationship we have that will be the importance. So as a father, it's about being there with your full self. And it doesn't mean you have to be 100% of yourself. You just need to be there, because some days we're not 100%, and that's totally okay. And then
and it's the intention to show up.
Yes.
It's not about being perfect and how you show up. It's the intention of showing up.
So like my daughter, she's a wackadoodle kind of kid, and she's very curious, and we love it. I call her my little monster, because she's just all over the place with love. She never does anything maliciously. I don't think she knows that yet. She's only 19 months old, but she sometimes has a dance party. And as a joke, when we redid her new room, I put a rug in the room and I said, this is your dance floor. So sometimes she goes, Daddy, dance floor. And we go and we have a dance party.
Aww.
It takes literally 2 to 3 minutes of my life, of my day, where my daughter can't dance. She's literally just moving her feet around and shaking her hands and twerking and doing all these funny things with her tushy. But I then dance with her, and that's a moment and memory that then she refers back to, whether it's embracing. And also, I want to just plug for my wife for a second. As a father, it's also embracing my wife's moments with her. That if my wife wants, let's say, for example, my wife has to wake up early and go to work, and my daughter wakes up, they have cuddle time and bottle time together. Or my daughter will drink her bottle and they cuddle on the couch together. That's not my time. And that's okay. My wife deserves that as well. So it's really about embracing my wife's successes as a parent, being there for her when she's struggling, as she is for me when I'm struggling as a parent. So there were a couple of weeks where my daughter didn't say hello to me. She didn't talk to me. She was only mommy, mommy, mommy. And it killed me. because I love her so much. And I just want, it's not that I'm jealous of my wife. I just want
Of
to hang out with
course.
my daughter.
Yeah.
And my wife was extremely supportive and caring and totally understood that. And it wasn't a couple of weeks. It was probably a couple of days, but it felt like forever.
It felt like a long time.
And
Yeah.
because of Corona, we're always with each other. So who knows what
It was
time it was,
magnified. Yeah.
who knows what day it was and how long it lasted. But it's really, as a father, embracing your wife's successes and glory of a parent, the struggles, being there for them because it is hard and the challenges, and then hopefully they do the same for you.
Yeah. Oh, that's so beautiful. As you were talking, I'll have to share with you what was coming up for me. I'm jealous of your daughter, honestly.
Thank you.
And I mean that as a highest form of compliment, because I didn't have that growing up. I didn't have that with a dad. And my parents got divorced when I was around 3, and then I didn't live near him, and then he actually committed suicide when I was 10.
I remember
So
you
I
telling me
had
that.
like no real father relationship.
Yeah.
And so even like when I watch movies and I see these really present, loving dads, my heart yearns for, I wish I had a daddy who looked at me like that.
Yeah.
And it's
And
so beautiful, because the gift that you're giving your daughter is not just this relationship between the two of you, but it's setting her up for her future of how her relationship with men are going to look like in whatever
yes.
capacity, from respect and honor and value and connection and worthiness.
Yeah.
It's
And that,
huge.
and I love that you put it in that terms. And I appreciate you saying that. It means a lot to me because I try very hard. And I'm not always the best. I'm not always amazing. I
You
have my
don't need to be
moments,
perfect. Yeah, of
but I
course.
think the words you used, the respect and the worth, those things are something that I value very much as a parent to give to my child or future children. I
Yeah.
think that as a therapist, something I see a lot, that is a big struggle for a lot of kids, are those words. Their parent,
Yeah.
like, especially when I work with teenagers, I love working with teenagers. I think they're just the best, and they're scary to work with, but that's what I love about them. And a lot of it is I don't feel worthy. I don't feel loved. I don't feel cared for. I don't feel heard or seen.
I don't feel seen.
So
Yeah.
to have a parent who does that, so it's kind of like a circle. Like my work impacts my life, and my life then impacts how I work.
Yeah.
And it's not that I bleed into one or the other, which I try not to, but it's the thought process of, okay, if I'm a therapist and I'm trying to do these for my clients, I should do that for my kid.
Right.
And I think it has made me a better father and a better person being a therapist. And I think vice
Yeah.
versa, has made me a more caring, in touch person as well.
Well, at the core of it, I think what both you and I are talking about, and I'm Jewish, and so I'm raised in those same value sets. And there's stories I think you and I could just share back and forth that may not be as much of interest to our listeners as it would be to you and I. And at the core of it, it's being values driven.
Yeah.
And not necessarily a different set of values to run your business as you run your personal life. Like, to
Mm-hmm.
me, ideally, those values are consistent.
Yes.
And it's interesting. I've been working with a business coach kind of on and off for the past couple of years, and I'm working with her again right now. And just yesterday in our little boot camp workshop that we've got going on, we had to do a values exercise. And I feel like I know my values, but just writing them out again is always a good
Yeah.
practice. And, my top values are authenticity, acceptance, compassion, growth. And there was one more I've now just escaped as I just listed it. But, these are the values of how I want to treat myself,
Mm-hmm.
of how I want to show up in the work that I do, whether it's on a social media post, whether it's on a podcast interview, whether it's one-on-one with the client, but it's also how I want to show up as a partner to John, as a mother to my daughters, as a mother figure to John's daughter. Like, I don't want these values to shift in whatever role I'm in. I want to be consistent in authenticity and compassion and acceptance, no
But
matter where I go.
that's being authentic 1,000%, is that through and through your values are the same. And I love that you brought in the religious aspect. When we do like value things, like whether it was school or I don't know, some boot camp or platform or whatever it is, that someone's like, oh, what are your values? I feel I don't have an issue with that because it's been so ingrained in me growing up as a kid that you have
Yeah.
values that matter and they make you who you are. And I think as parents, we struggle to sometimes pass those on, but a lot of times it's not about like teaching and giving them a handbook and saying, here, it's about showing.
It's embodiment. Yeah.
Exactly. So when you are role modeling and you show your kids how to be a good spouse or partner, a loving spouse, a loving partner, how you treat or look at your partner, all those little things, how you treat others when a guest comes over, how you deal with people outside of your home, whether it's shopping.
Yeah.
I know now is a weird time, and it's a little foggy of how we do that sometimes because we have to stay so far away. How we deal with our friends, our family, adventures, flexibility, all those kind of things that kids see everything.
Yeah.
Which is my wife said to me yesterday, she's like, this is really scary when you watch all these horror stories and scary things about children and parents and the lessons that they learn from them. She reads too many horror and thriller books. And so it really is a huge responsibility, but it doesn't have to be so difficult if you just live an authentic life.
Yeah, it's, I want to share something because I think it speaks to what we're talking about. And I'd love to see how you show up in this. And your daughter might be a little bit young, but I think it's a good intention to share, given the context of our conversation. And also for you to continue to show up in this way to your daughter. But I have a mindful parenting membership. And part of the membership program is I've got 2 live calls a month to delve further into the modules and application of the tools. And this month's module has been about emotions and how we as parents role model our own emotional experiences to our kids, because it's often we want them to show up in a way that maybe we're not actually doing ourselves, right?
Yeah.
So I shared this quick story that earlier in COVID, I think it was May, my daughter, she's now 17, found out that some really major plans of hers had to get canceled. She was supposed to be at camp for 8 weeks all summer. She was supposed to go to Israel for the semester, like all the things she'd been working for years, just like boom, gone, no replacement opportunities, like just done, right? And I just was devastated for her. And that same day, I had a potential job thing that didn't come through that I was really disappointed about. And I think I just had a hard day of clients because it was clearly in the height of, the shutdown, and life was hard.
Yeah.
My daughter comes into my office. I was sitting on my meditation cushion here in my office, and I was crying. And I just was crying. And she comes in and she says, "Mom, are you okay?" I said, "Actually, Ari, I'm really sad." And I think a typical parenting response would be to like wipe away the tears, like kind of regain some composure, be like, "Oh, no, honey, sweetie, don't worry about it. I'm fine. I'm okay," and kind of shift away from my emotion. And I didn't do that. And I just said, "I'm really sad. I'm devastated for your losses. I'm upset this job thing. My clients were heavy today. And I'm just really sad." And you know what she did? She said, "Come here, Mom, let me hold you." And she sat down next to me. She put her arms around me. She's taller than I am, so this makes it easier. And I laid my head on her chest. And I just cried as my daughter held me. And later that night, she came downstairs and she was crying. She goes, "Mom, I'm really sad about camp in Israel." And I really feel, first of all, it was amazing that as a mother, my 16-year-old child could provide comfort and security and reassurance to me by just her showing up, which wasn't an inappropriate boundary, right? This is just the value of compassion, right? Parents often feel like, I can't expect that from my kid or get that because that would be a weird boundary, right? No, this is a human, like you were saying, as a therapist. And I also feel that me crying, which was a fully appropriate response to the situation, gave her the permission to do the same. And so that night when she started to cry, I ended up just saying, "All right, come here." That's what I would have done anyway. But it was just like all of a sudden the mirror image occurred.
Yeah.
Right. And I ended up writing her this letter that I ended up publishing, which I'll even put in the show notes, because I think it's a really valuable letter for people to hear of how to talk with their children about their losses, especially during COVID. But as a mom, like holding the space without trying to fix it. Because that's the thing, like your daughter isn't at that developmental stage, but you'll begin to see where our tendency as parents to just want to fix it versus just to be with in
Yeah.
compassion. It's hard to do. It's a
I have so
hard
many
space
thoughts on
to
this
be in.
story.
Yeah, share,
I have
please.
so many good thoughts. First of all, I think you're right off the bat. As a parent, you shouldn't hide your emotions, especially when they're healthy.
Yes.
So all emotions are accepted, right? It's okay to be angry. It's okay to be sad. All the negative emotions, quote unquote,
Yep.
that we kind of put labels on them. But let's say, for example, you're crying. To wipe away the tears and put on a happy face while your kid comes into the room, that is dismissing your feelings, which is not helpful.
Yep.
And also it shows them that when I get sad, when mommy and daddy get sad, they wipe their tears away. So when I get sad, I can't be sad.
I should do the
And
same.
exactly. But it doesn't mean that you need to then overshare as a parent.
Yeah.
You can still say, mommy's or dad, we're sad. X, Y, and Z happened. You don't have to get into the details and what the argument was, why you're upset, all the little things that is not their burden or responsibility to
Right.
know or to carry. But it doesn't mean you shouldn't share that you're allowed to be sad.
Yes.
Or even when you're happy, right? When you're happy, of course you share that with your children. X, Y, and Z happened. Hooray. And the kids cheer because you want them to learn when you're happy, you should be happy and embrace it. So why not the sad? Why not the anger? But there's a healthy way of dealing with it. And it's our job as parents to show them. But by hiding it, I know, like, one of the biggest things I remember getting married, one of the things, don't argue in front of the kids. And I hear that. I agree with you. But there is an importance of showing our children how we communicate when we're frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
We should have the all-out yelling match in front of our children, cursing, screaming, slamming doors. That's not helpful.
Right.
But for kids, if there's like a disagreement, to talk it out in a constructive way, that's important for our children to have.
Absolutely.
It's always about what they're seeing and how they can then learn for their future relationships and their future things. And, there's a lot of research on bullying. And one of the biggest research is the cycle of bullying that is passed down from generation to generation,
Mm-hmm.
because a parent didn't handle their anger well and did it inappropriately in front of their kids, or talked inappropriately in front of their kids. And then their kids say, oh, my mommy and daddy can do that. Then I can do that. And then they get angry. What do? They bully or do the same thing their parents did to them or in front of them.
It's the role modeling. Yeah.
Exactly. So we have to be very careful, but especially with that story, when it's healthy emotions, don't wipe away the tears. Don't hide that, embrace that. And I think, I do that for my mom and for my father. When my grandmother passed away, I felt that I had to be the strong one because they weren't.
Yeah.
They were distraught. So was I. But there was a moment where I was holding my father, who is a lot older than me. And he's crying, which he does not do very often, but it was his mother. And it was very last second. It was a very sad, like 10 days of her getting sick to dying. And I had to be the strong one and be the support for him. It doesn't mean my father relies on me for support solely, because that's inappropriate. But it also means that he knows that I can be there for him. Just like my mother, if she's having a hard day, I'm 6'2". My whole family's smaller than me. I'm like the hugger. I'm the hugger, and they kind of hug. But when I was really upset, a month later, after I finally processed her loss, I was sitting on my parents' lap, crying in their shoulders. Yeah. So it's okay, because I knew that I can be a support for them, and I saw the emotions in my household, that I knew I could have emotions. But if it was always hidden from me, I wouldn't know it was okay. So I love that story.
It's such a gift to provide. And, I think that story scares a lot of parents because it's vulnerable.
Yes.
And
crying in front of your kid. Oh no, they're going to have emotions.
Yeah. And, even the other day, so my puppy, who's not a puppy, he's 1.5 years, kind of was having some regression behavior, and he was peeing in the house. And I was pissed because, like, I keep my house very, very well. And I was upset that, I felt like the carpet was ruined and all. But like, I was frustrated and angry, and my kids don't often see that in me, because I tend to just not have a lot of things that anger and frustrate me. But it was, again, an authentic expression, and appropriate, like, I'm so frustrated right now.
A dog peed in the house. Exactly.
The dog's peeing all over the carpet. The house smells like carpet. The house smells like pee. And, I quickly called the carpet cleaner and was taken care of. But it was yet another example to authentically express an appropriate emotion within an appropriate context. It's not to say, when I'm angry, I'm now yelling and screaming and throwing things. Because yes, that's being vulnerable. Yes, that's expressing your emotion. But is that the role modeling that you'd want them to do?
Exactly. And that's the point. And it also means that as parents, we something I see a lot as a therapist, working with parents and families, is sometimes parents using their children as their support, and that's not okay either, because that is not their burden or responsibility as well.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that you can't share your emotions in the context that is welcome and important, and the balance is key. That if you had a rough day, don't take it out on your children because it's not their fault. That's just projecting.
Yep.
Don't use them as a soundboard for why you don't like your spouse, right?
Yeah.
That never works out well, and that's really inappropriate. And don't use them to badmouth your coworkers or anything like that. That is not their fault. It's not their job to be that listener. Get a therapist, talk to your spouse, talk to someone else. But it
Yep.
doesn't mean you can't show your kids what healthy emotions look like and how you
Yep.
handle healthy emotions when they come.
I love it. Ellie, you and I could talk for hours.
Yes, we can.
I am so happy to have had you on today. And I think there's so much value that people are going to take from this conversation. And I so appreciate your time and coming on. And so how can
Always.
people find you?
Well, I have a website, elevation.org. It's elivation.org.com was taken. My Instagram is elevation_therapist. And I have my podcast, The Dude Therapist, is streaming on all streaming devices or websites.
Beautiful.
And reach out however and whenever. And if I can help you, I will do the best to find someone who can. And really, I thank you so much for making the time for me. I know you're busy. Just wrote a book, and that's awesome. And I got it this week, and it's on my shelf, right? Like the next book to read. So I'm really excited to get into it.
Well, it's so wonderful to connect with such like-minded people, and it's part of the reason I love having a podcast, is because I get to connect with people, and I feel like I've got friends all over the country. So next time I'm in New York, I'm definitely calling you up, and we're gonna go get some good deli together, please.
We will.
Happy New Year to you, and be well.
Thanks,
and
you too.
I hope your family and everyone stays safe and healthy.
To continue your journey forward, find Jory Rose on Facebook and Instagram to become part of her growing community. You can also gain access to her meditations, books, online classes, or to sign up for an upcoming retreat. Visit her at joryrose.com. That's JOREEROSE.com.